Om. 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 Welcome to my Zen Temple Dojo. In today's video, we are going to be examining how to become enlightened through Buddhist practices and the implications, the metaphysical, profound implications of Buddhism through reincarnation for our afterlife. All right, I can't do this. All right, if you want to see me in this voice, you're gonna have to see me in my short film, A Glimpse of Enlightenment. It's just the smugness is just really. Anyways, all right. Parker, back to normal. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm back. The Buddhist philosophy begins with Gautama Buddha. As the story goes, the Buddha had all the comforts of material success, had found this to be ultimately dissatisfying, and so he left this life in order to become enlightened. After several years of meditating in a forest, the Buddha finally surrendered and had an awakening. An awakening so profound that it could not be put into words. Zen has a way of putting riddles for you to awaken and to come to these insights yourself. From this awakening came the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism. The first being that life is suffering, or dukkha. I'm sure that all of us, no matter where our position in society, have at some point or another suffered. We are born into the world, we age, we see our friends and family pass away, and into this, or we get into this or that relationship and we see it blow up in our face. We have this craving and that craving, and we even may get the craving and try to satisfy it, but the thing that we tried to satisfy it with wasn't the same as it once was. And the nature of reality is ultimately transitory. The second noble truth of Buddhism is that the cause of this suffering is this clinging to, quote, reality that is constantly changing, the Maya, as Hindus put it. In the West, it's difficult, for instance, it's the default for us to cling to our bank account. We seek to maintain control over environment and existence, from plastic surgery to boner pills. See my free will video and you'll see how it's an unrealistic expectation to try and have control over everything. This is also based on a false assumption of who we are. This idea that we can control everything, but we'll address that later. The third noble truth of Buddhism is that the cure for suffering is to let go of desire. And this is quite a feat, so don't beat yourself up if you can't let go of all your desires immediately. But it can be useful to observe our desires and our motivations during meditation. The fourth noble truth is that liberation can be attained through the Eightfold Path: right view, right intentions, right speech, right action, right livelihood. See my video on that subject. Right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. I quote from Aldous Huxley's notes on Zen. Quote, "In itself, the world is a continuum, but when we think about it in terms of words, we are compelled, by the very nature of our vocabulary and syntax, to conceive of it as something composed of separate things and distinct classes. We are lost in our minds, using language that is only a representation of reality and not direct reality itself. The Buddhists have access to reality through the direct practice of meditation. Quote, there is a certain thing, it is black as lacquer, it supports heaven and earth, it always appears in activity, but no one can grasp it in activity. My disciples, how can you grasp it?" The Zen master given as example in this essay goes on to reveal that the self cannot be revealed through activity, such as the mundane routines of our lives or reading books, but through silence and looking inward. In Buddhism, the Eastern philosophy, generally speaking, the ego is an illusion. This is counterintuitive to us in the West, where the ego is everything. It's our whole culture. The most famous celebrities and business people and politicians have the biggest egos. So you may ask, how can I achieve anything if I don't have an ego? The Zen outlook on this, however, is that life itself is a never-ending process. I quote from Notes on Zen. There is no ego in anything. Thus, what is known as the two kinds of non-ego means that there is no ego in man and no ego in things. From metaphysics, Sokai passes to ethics. According to his faith of non-ego, he asks, how can we act in daily life? This is one of the great questions. The flower has no ego. In the spring it blooms, in the autumn it dies. The stream has no ego within it. The wind blows and waves appear. The river drops abruptly, and there is a waterfall. We ourselves must feel these things within ourselves. We must realize by our own experience how this non-ego functions within us. It functions without any hindrance, without any artificiality. So now that we have a foundation of Buddhist philosophy, I figured we'd have a good look at a few of those Zen riddles that I referred to earlier. I could sit here and deconstruct them for you, but I would prefer for you to have the aha moment yourself, or some juicy insights. The first is called A Cup of Tea. Nanin, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nanin served tea, and he poured his visitors a full cup, and then kept pouring and pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. It's overflowing. No more will go in. Like this cup, Nanin said, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? Nothing exists. As a student of Zen visited one master after the other. He called Dokun of Shoku, desiring to show his attainment. He said, the mind, Buddha, and sentient beings, after all, do not exist. The true nature of phenomena is emptiness. There is no realization, no delusion, no sage, no mediocrity. There is no giving and nothing to be received. Dokwan, who was smoking quietly, said nothing. Suddenly he whacked Yamoka with a bamboo pipe. This made the youth quite angry. Quote, if nothing exists, where could this anger come from? How grass and trees become enlightened. During the Kamakura period, Shinkhan studied Tendai 6 years and then studied Zen 7 years. Then he went to China and contemplated Zen for 13 years more. When he returned to Japan, many desired to interview him and ask obscure questions. But when he received visitors, which was infrequently, he seldom answered their questions. One day a 50-year-old student of enlightenment said to Shinkhan, quote, I have studied the Tendai school of thought since I was a little boy, but one thing in it I cannot understand. Tendai claims that even the grass and trees will become enlightened. To me this seems very strange. Of what use is it to discuss how grass and trees become enlightened? Asked Shinkhan. The question is how you yourself can become so. Did you ever consider that? I never thought of it in that way, marveled the old man. Then go home and think it over, finished Shinkhan. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. At one point they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and beautiful woman, also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her to cross the other side. The two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows not to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless. And an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then finally the younger monk couldn't contain himself any longer and blurted out, as monks, we are not permitted a woman. How could you then carry that woman on your shoulders? The older monk looked at him and said, Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her? The last I have chosen is on killing. Quote, those who speak against killing and who desire to spare the lives of all conscious beings are right. It is good to protect even animals and insects. But what about those persons who kill time? And what about those persons who are destroying wealth? Those who destroy political economy? We should not overlook them. Furthermore, what of the one who preaches without enlightenment? He is killing Buddhism. So, all this lofty philosophy is great, but how can I apply this to my life? One thing that immediately comes to mind is goals. For me, that was guitar playing. Or, it could be for guitar playing, it could be for any endeavor. It could be tempting to focus strictly on results. So say if I wanted to play like Steve Vai or Eddie Van Halen or someone else. However, when applying Zen philosophy to guitar playing, the process takes the importance. Yeah, so achieving our goals is great. But there is a vast mountain between now and achieving them. So we may as well enjoy the process while we're in it. I highly recommend the books Zen Guitar or Zen and the Art of Archery for this. What about what happens when you die? In other religions such as Christianity, when you die, you are either sentenced to heaven or hell. It is not uncommon for atheists to believe that there isn't an afterlife at all. Agnostics claim that it is impossible to know. What about before this current incarnation? And this is where you can kind of start to get curious. When you die, your incarnation, your karma of this incarnation will determine the life of future incarnations. And likewise, your current incarnation is the result of the karma of your past lives. Buddhists and Hindus, funny enough, Scientologists as well believe in reincarnation. As a side note, Scientologists make you sign a billion-year contract to pledge your allegiance to the organization. In fact, in Buddhism, in order to find the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, they see if he can select certain items from his past life. I quote from Alan Watts in his book, The Way of Zen, on this subject. Quote, "Many Buddhists understand the round of birth and death quite literally as a process of reincarnation, wherein the karma which shapes the individual does so again and again in life and after, until, through insight and awakening, it is laid to rest. But in Zen and in other schools, it is often taken in a much more curative way, as the process of rebirth is from moment to moment, so that one is being born, so long as one identifies himself with a continuing ego which reincarnates itself and refreshes a moment of time. Its importance is rather that it exemplifies the whole problem of action and vicious circles and its resolution. And in this respect, Buddhist philosophy should have a special interest of students of communication theory, cybernetics, philosophy, and similar matters. Buddhists and Hindus alike believe that the last thought at the moment of death determines the character of the next incarnation. As the Bardo teaches, so have the sages of India long thought that the thought process of a dying person should be rightly directed, preferably by the dying person, if he or she has been initiated or psychically trained to meet death, or otherwise by a guru or a friend or relative versed in the science of death. In the Bhagavad Gita, says Arjuna, one attaineth whatever state of being one thinketh about at last when relinquishing the body, being ever absorbed in the thought thereof. Past thinking has determined our present status, and our present thinking will determine our future status. For man is what man thinks. In the words of the opening verse of the Dhammapada, all that we are is the result that we thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. Likewise did the Hebrew sages teach, as in Proverbs 7, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is lie. So in the beginning we acknowledge that life is suffering, and that the suffering is caused by clinging to a reality that is constantly changing. The question arises, then, how do we become liberated from this pesky reincarnation process? Well, there's quite a few methods to achieving this state of oneness. One is to use koans or mantras, and the other is to use meditation. Eventually, after meditating enough times, the mind will pause for a bit, and you'll get to see everything exactly as it is. No mental chatter or usual neurotic dissatisfaction that usually plagues our consciousness. Inevitably, after a few seconds, your mind will go, aha, this is it. This is what the mystics are talking about. You'll realize that you're thinking in your mind again. And this is what is called a shallow kensho, which translates to seeing. A total kensho should be such a deep state of surrender that if someone were to attack you, you couldn't even attack back, because that would be attacking yourself, in essence. This is against everything that is intrusive to our ego, because I appear to be separate from the background, for instance. We have individuality on the one hand and a kind of cosmic unity on the other. To resolve this, I quote from the Three Pillars of Zen. When you have kensho, you see into the world of equality. And this realization can be either shallow or deep. At least at first can show as shallow. In either case, you still do not understand the world of differentiation, the world that people ordinarily assume they do understand. As you continue your practice on subsequent koans, your awareness of the world of oneness, of non-differentiation becomes clearer. And since it is through this world of oneness that you are seeing the world of differentiation, this latter also becomes clearer. You can help people only when you are able to recognize and accept the differences among them, seeing each individual in the light of his or her own unique qualities. To do so represents an advanced state of training. Well, it looks like we could use a hell of a lot more of that before the election. That would be nice. So that was today's episode where we discussed Buddhism and reincarnation. It's kind of a start of that. But I've been meditating since late 2016, so that'd be about 4 years in the fall coming up. And it just amazes me how much I still, learn on a lot of these traditions and, insights of these mystics and so on, and with the meditation practice. And I think recently this year I brought in the mantras with my practice, and it just kind of blows my mind just how many layers there are to this thing. So if you're interested, I will put all of the books that I read on this subject, the resources, and I hope it will be useful for your own practice if you want to start looking into spiritual matters and your own meditation process and process of awakening. So that concludes today's episode. You can check us out on Instagram, YouTube, maybe a few other places in the future. My assistant and I will be putting together a short film, hopefully another one. I hope you enjoyed the first in the relative future, hopefully by the end of the year. And, I realize there's a lot of chaos and division and turmoil, but, just like our meditation practice shows, it's useful to be aware and not necessarily calm, but in the observer state. So to be observing ourselves and our beliefs and how we view the other and so on in this crazy time. And it's always good to be kind of in the observer state. It's difficult, but I hope you found this video useful, and stay tuned.